Hey guys, it's Paul from Team APS. So today I'm going to be profiling my Witchcrafter deck. As you guys know, I've been building this one for a hot minute. Took some time to get Witchcrafter creation. But now that I have it, I do want to profile it. It's a very fun deck. It's a really cool deck, and thanks to the reprint, it is now a fairly affordable deck. So I would recommend playing it. I've also got some pretty experimental card deck building decisions in here that I'll get into a little bit more when I get to them. But yeah, so let's hop in with the first monster, which is Witchcrafter Shemitah, or someone can tell me. All of the Witchcrafters have the same first effect, and that is that during the main phase, you've got a quick effect where you contribute them and then discard a spell card from your hand, and you're able to summon any Witchcrafter monster from your deck. So all the small ones work this way. Now, this in and of itself is pretty important. It allows you to quickly get to any Witchcrafter monster in your deck that you want, which is wonderful. However, this is a neg 1. So you have to be pretty careful with this because obviously you can't use this and then get another small one and then use that and keep doing it because you'll run out of cards. So it's a great way to reach your boss monsters quickly, but you don't want this to get ashed. And that's not good news. We have many counters to ash in this deck, so it doesn't come up too much, but just something to keep in mind. Now anyway, they also each have a graveyard effect. Shemitah's got the most useful one in my opinion. She can banish herself from the graveyard and then send one of your other Witchcrafter spells to the grave. That's important because they recycle themselves, which I'll explain a little bit more when I get to the spells, but just know that she's pretty much the best one in the deck and the one that you want to see the most often. One last thing about the quick effects too. You can use these in your own turn or in your opponent's turn, and there are times when you'll want to wait for your opponent's turn to use these so that you can use a certain spell and then send a certain spell in your opponent's turn, and it'll still be able to come back in your end phase. But a little more on that later. Okay, next, Witchcrafter Pitor. Same first effect, can summon a Witchcrafter from your deck. Also in the graveyard, you can banish it, draw one card, and then discard a Witchcrafter card. But if you don't have a Witchcrafter card to discard, you're going to have to send your whole hand to the grave. Now that should never happen. You should always have a Witchcrafter card before you even use this, unless you're crazy or desperate. But, yeah, that's all there really is to her. You just want to see her for the same, more or less, reason you want to see Shemitah. And then 2 Witchcrafter Jinni. This is one of the newer ones. Same effect to summon from deck, so that's great and all. But in the graveyard, she can actually banish herself and another spell and take the effect of that spell without actually activating it. So the reason why this is so important is because with many of the spell cards, well really all of them, if you activated them that turn, like Witchcrafter Creation to get your search, then you cannot add them back to your hand during the end phase. By using them with Witchcrafter Jinni, however, you will just be applying their effect without actually activating them. So then if you have another copy in your grave, or you end up discarding another copy from one of your effects, they can still get added back to the hand. You have to be pretty thoughtful about how you do this because it is, of course, banishing the card from your grave forever, so it's more useful if you have duplicates and things like that. But it's just a neat thing to have, and it can be a very good plus because if you're getting a free search or a free Monster Reborn with Witchcrafter Holiday, then that's good. That's why I actually only run 2 copies of her because I don't find that I ever really am going to be able to do that too many times. So yeah, that's all for the small ones. Now the boss monsters, Witchcrafter Hain, or Hein, or whatever. So your opponent can't target your other spellcasters with card effects, but they can target her, so keep that in mind. Well, her quick effect is that you can discard a spell and then pop one of your opponent's face-up cards. This is a pretty good disruption. It can get rid of boss monsters, certain combo starters, that sort of deal. You can use it in both turns. It's nice. If you wanted to run Magician's Souls, this would probably be one of the better ones to send with it too. But I was going to try out Magician's Souls, but I'm not in this build because it's complicated. Anyways, your other boss monster is Witchcrafter Smug Lowly, or Madame Vera. So she's got 2 very useful effects. In addition to having 2800 defense, which is great. So during damage calculation, whenever your spellcaster is battling, you can reveal any number of spells with different names in your hand, and the Witchcrafter or spellcaster will gain 1000 attack and defense for each. This can be pretty deadly actually, because once you've accumulated a lot of spells in your hand, and you generally should have a lot in your opponent's turn, you can give your Witchcrafter monster 3 or even 4000 more attack or defense, which your opponent could run into and end up taking loads of damage. Also, she's got a quick effect that lets you discard a spell, and then you can negate all of your opponent's face-up monster's effects for the turn, so very good. You can actually sit and stall on this thing for longer than you would think, and that actually comes up sometimes. So next is Witchcrafter Golem Aruru. Strange name. So when your opponent activates an effect that targets one of your spellcasters, or they target it for an attack, you can activate this thing's effect in your hand. You'll target either a card that they have on their field or one of your spells in the graveyard. You special summon this, and then you bounce that card to the hand. So you either bounce one of your opponent's cards, or you bounce a spell in your grave back to your hand. Spell is in like a Witchcrafter spell. So great, and then during your opponent's standby phase, this will return to the hand. It's kind of a confusing effect, but the gist of this is that it's kind of like a protection thing, kind of like a removal recycling thing, and it continues to bounce back and over and over again, so you can continue to use it. When it's on the field, it's pretty good because of its high attack strength. I've considered running 2 copies of this. It can technically be dead, but it is nice to see it early on because it effectively functions as another form of like protection, and that's something this deck kind of is lacking / doesn't have lots of space for. Because as you'll learn with Witchcrafters, they don't play that nicely with other archetypes or anything. You don't get much space, so that's how it goes. That's it for these. Next, Psy-Frame Gear Gamma. I would normally not run a card like this in this sort of deck, but like I said before, Ash Blossom ruins your day. So you need as many ways to deal with Ash Blossom as you possibly can. The good news here is that since you tribute your Witchcrafter monsters as a cost after their effects, you usually won't have a monster in the field when that's happening. So if your opponent uses Ash, you've got Gamma, and that's good, and you can make Omega. And Omega can actually recycle things like Shemitah, which is nice. But you really are just running this for protection because Ash will destroy your day and you won't be able to play. Okay, spells. Triple Witchcrafter creation. This is the Rhoda, and here's where I'll explain how the spells work. During your end phase, you can add this from your graveyard to your hand if you control a Witchcrafter monster. However, you can only use one effective Witchcrafter creation per turn. This goes for pretty much all the spells. So basically, if I use this to search, then I can't get it in the end phase. But if I don't, and it's just in my grave, then I can get it in the end phase. So if I were to like pitch it for one of my Witchcrafter monsters' effects, I can recycle it, and of course you want to have lots of spells in your hand so you can use their effects in your opponent's turn. It basically means that you have to pay a lot of attention to which spells you're using, which spells you have used, what can you afford to lose, what could you discard in your opponent's turn. It's fun because it involves a lot of thinking, but it can be really slow. If your opponent gives this deck a lot of time to ramp up, you can have overwhelming amounts of card advantage. But if you are not very enterprising with your cards, you can lose everything. So just be careful. Witchcrafter Holiday, same thing, except it's a Monster Reborn. Witchcrafter Draping, it's a pretty good card. It bounces spells and traps your opponent controls up to the number of Witchcrafters you have. So that's pretty handy in some matchups. Witchcrafter By Street and Scroll. So these are the continuous spells. I like these because they sit on the field and they sort of provide passive beneficial effects. This protects each of your Witchcrafters from being destroyed once per turn. And with this one, if one of your spellcasters destroys a monster by battle, you can draw a card. Now, while these are on the field, you can treat them as discards for your Witchcrafter monster's effects, which is cool. And then during the end phase, if you didn't use that part, then when they're in the grave, they can come back to the field like how your other cards can come back to the hand. So again, lots of recycling and all of that. These are the only ones I run. I know there's Witchcrafter Collaboration. Didn't seem worth running. Other spells. Pot of Extravagance. This deck does not use its extra deck very much at all, so it doesn't really matter. And you can always use the extra draw power because you'll need spells to be discarding. And if this is ever dead for whatever reason, you can just pitch it because it's a spell. So yeah. 3 Called by the Grave. We gotta stop that Ash Blossom. Now, this sort of controversial decision I made was instead of running like lots of hand traps and infinite impermanence, I instead decided to go heavy on the spells, so I would always have spells to discard, and so far it's worked out okay. Triple Forbidden Chalice, it's rather similar to infinite impermanence. It can negate a monster's effect, and it also gives them 400 attack until the end of the turn, so that can be useful in battle because it can be used in the damage step. However, it's a spell, so you can't use it if you're going second like you'd be able to use impermanent, so that's the downside, but it hasn't hurt me too much. 3 Book of Moon, because this just came back to 3 pretty recently, so it's a good disruption. 2 Cosmic Cyclone, this is just good in a number of matchups, you know. And Monster Reborn. That's it for the deck. I will say, before I get into the extra deck, that this probably could afford to use some traps. If you use a trap, just go for a some floodgate, summon limit maybe. That might be a useful one. Or there can be only one, depending, could be okay, that type of thing. rivalry maybe. Okay, Cypher Mode Omega to make with your driver, and the rest of these don't really matter. I literally have space like placeholder things. I'll talk about that one, but yeah, I mean most of this is stuff that you won't make. These could be okay, that could be okay. Witchcrafter Genius level 1. You can make Crowley and like actually tribute summon your high level ones if you're desperate or something. And Celine is alright too. Alright, and that's the deck. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is my first draft of Witchcrafters. It'll probably change a lot. If you guys have suggestions, please let me know. Like I said, I was considering Magician Souls. I also considered cards like Reasoning. You could do the whole Floodgate Trap idea. There's lots of things. But I've gone on long enough. Hopefully you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next one. Pass turn.